So if states and countries are the same, what the heck is a nation? What is that? A large aggregate of people united by common descent, history, culture, or language, inhabiting a particular country or territory. Now, wait a second. One, that's a pretty good definition. And number two, that's way different, actually, than what we define as a state. So, as synonyms, it literally says that countries and states are synonymous with nation. And the reason for that, ladies and gentlemen, is because we use those words synonymously. So if you're watching the news and everyone talks about nations and states, and you have to look at context to realize they're saying the exact same thing, just using different words, it's important for the sake of discourse to know that when you're asked about nations and states, a state is going to be the territory, the people, and the government, the sovereignty. A nation is going to be a group of people with a common descent, history, culture, language. You could throw maybe race. You could throw maybe a struggle. You could throw values and beliefs in there as well. All these things make up a nation of people. It's almost kind of like an ethnicity in a way. A nation is not the same as a state, despite how you will hear it used interchangeably on the news. A nation, here's this definition comes out of the AP Human Geography AMSCO book. A group of people who share common heritage, I paraphrase it. So it comes out of that, but it's also, I'll paraphrase it. They share common values, beliefs, are bound to a geographic region because of history and tradition and a desire to govern themselves. Now, that desire to govern themselves is also a really important part of it. And that, again, this here is our definition of a state. So the French, are we looking at a nation? Well, we already established the French or France as a state, right? But they all speak French for the most part, all right? They're all ethnically the same for the most part. They all have a Catholic heritage. They all share a similar history, okay? They're all, despite what you might see in the news, for the most part, politically united in that they agree on the same basic way that the government and constitution and all that's going to work. The people of France are a nation, y'all. They're a nation and they're a state, all right? So what we're looking at here, and they have all those things, what we're looking at here is a bona fide nation state. Now, I would write this down. So a nation state is what happens when the two concepts come together as one. You have a group of people bound by history, language, culture, beliefs, and values, whatever that might be, as well as their own territory and as well as their own government with sovereignty. All right, so the word we use to describe a nation state is homogeneous or homogeneity. All right, in other words, everyone there is pretty much going to be nationally the same. Now, I'm not saying that 100% of everyone in France is going to be a French-speaking French guy with French history that's Catholic. That's just not true. But the majority of them are, okay? Other great examples of bona fide nation states is Korea, Japan, France, Italy, Iceland. This is just a few. I mean, I tried my best. I have a map somewhere that shows just kind of like a sprinkling of different nation states across the earth. I tried so hard to find it, and I could not find it in any of my stuff. I don't know what I've done with it. But especially Korea, especially Japan, especially Italy and Iceland, these places are almost entirely nationally homogeneous, okay? Especially Korea and Japan. There just aren't going to be very many people that are not Korean in Korea, and there are not Japanese in Japan. You might also see sometimes where you would consider other European countries like the United Kingdom or not the United Kingdom, like Germany maybe, to be a nation state. There are some that you would not. Like, for example, Belgium is not a nation state because there are two different nations living within Belgium. Belgium's pretty small, but you've got the Flemish and you got the Walloons, who are completely different people on a national level. We already talked about how the United Kingdom is not going to be a nation state because you've got the United Kingdom is comprised of 4 different nations of people that don't identify nationally as one and the same. More on that in a second. You also have stateless nations. Now, this right here goes back to the definition of what a nation is, where we talked about how they want to, let me find it real quick. They want to govern themselves, okay? So if you look at a place like the Kurds or Kurdistan, geez, I don't even have a map. How terrible. If you look at the Middle East, around Syria, really from eastern Turkey all the way up to northern Iraq, you've got this whole group of people called the Kurds that live in that geographic area, but they don't have their own state, and they want their own state, but they have to share their borders with all these other countries that have sovereignty. And so this is an example of a stateless nation. The Palestinians, right? Are example of a stateless nation living with people in Israel, and you still see that in the news a lot as well. These guys do have UN representation though, but they're not seen as a sovereign state. The Basque, we talked about the people living in kind of in that area right between Spain and France, kind of in northern Spain and southwestern France. They are the only remaining people from the pre-Indo-European age. They speak a completely non-Indo-European language. And so they're also going to be an autonomous region, but they're a stateless nation. They actually share, part of them live in Spain, part of them live in France. Quebec in Canada. These guys are French speaking. They are not nationally the same as everyone else. There's English speaking. You also have the Nunavut people living in Canada. There's another nation. So and other Native American groups consider themselves to be nations. And by definition that I just provided earlier in the PowerPoint, yeah, they are. Which brings me to the definition of a multinational state, okay? A multinational state is going to be a state that has multiple nations living within. So we've already hit on a few of these: Canada, the United Kingdom. I've heard, and people have talked about the United States as a multinational state as well as a nation state. Just for a second, if we think about the United States as a nation state, what would it be that would bind us together as a nation of people? Because we are very, very ethnically diverse and have a lot of people from all over the world that kind of mix into our historical legacy into what we are today. That's why we call ourselves a melting pot. Can we possibly be a nation? Well, one thing that even though you might think differently when you watch the news, the vast majority of people in our country feel in line and united around the idea of the freedoms protected by the Constitution. Okay, freedom of speech, the freedom of expression, freedom of religion. One thing that we, for the most part, really value is the idea that you can believe whatever the heck you want to believe, but you're not going to cause me to have to believe that too, because we just inherently agree on that very concept. So that there is one way we could definitely see ourselves as a nation, is we have that much in common. So you can argue it either way. Russia is extremely multinational. China has multiple nations. We already talked about the people of Taiwan, the people of Hong Kong, but we also have people that are completely different, like the people of Tibet, which are Buddhist, and also are their own thing. Here is an example of Russia and all the ethnic groups. Now, this is ethnic groups. A lot of these groups that kind of live along the mainly the southern border and the eastern border of Russia, they consider themselves to be nationally different from the Russians. Okay, and so here is an incredibly multinational state. A multi-state nation then is going to be when a nation makes up more than one state. And the best example of this that I could find is Korea. Okay, and I have a map that I apparently put at the beginning of the slides and meant to put back down here at the end. Actually, here, hang on a sec. I'll go back and look at it real quick. Give me just a second. There it is. So your Korean Peninsula, the geographic Korean Peninsula, is comprised of the North Korea and South Korea. Right? And they're all Korean. They're just as Korean as the next Korean. Okay, every single one of them. They speak the same language. They come from the same history. They share all this same stuff. But ever since the communist takeover of the North under Kim Il Sung, the North has politically gone in this direction, and the South has politically gone in this direction. And so they're completely different political units, but they're all nationally Korean. That is a multi-state nation, because the nation exists within multiple states. All right, so I'll go back down here to the bottom. Sorry about that. Turn my captions on, turn my pointer back on. Okay, so and we're almost there. Actually, really, that's the majority of what I had to talk about today. We're a little bit. Oh, what do you know? I finished up before 50 minutes. That's different. But here's some of the things we talked about. We spent a lot of time looking at sovereignty, and I think that's so important to understanding why a state is understanding what sovereignty is and how that plays into the definition of a state. At the beginning of the presentation, I showed you a news hour, or I showed you the YouTube news, PBS Newshour news, or daily evening news is what I'm trying to say. They do a very good job, just kind of recap that real quick, at showing political geography as well as other things and how they relate in the world pertain to human geography. If you get a chance to watch even say 20 minutes of it, whenever I was in my classroom last year, I showed my study hall news hour. You know, we watched it every single day. They usually have the top headlines first, and then they have like a cultural unit kind of, you know, within the video. It's really, really cool for the course. If you get a chance to watch that, political geography would be a great time within the course to do that. I highly encourage it.